In a quiet suburban neighborhood, there lived a woman named Felicity. At 30, she possessed a rare combination of beauty, intelligence, and charm that captured the attention of everyone around her. Her career as a yoga instructor and wellness coach brought a peaceful energy into her life, but it was her natural allure, her graceful presence and radiant smile, that made her a beloved figure in the community. Though Felicity's business was flourishing, the weight of solitude often crept in. She had become independent after her husband, Gerda, unexpectedly left her 2 years ago. Since then, she had built her life from the ground up, creating a sanctuary of peace and balance for herself and her young son, Halcyon. Felicity loved helping others find calm in their chaotic lives, but she often found herself wishing for someone to help her find her own peace. One evening, as Felicity sat in her small but cozy living room, preparing for her evening yoga class, there was a knock at the door. It was late, and she wasn't expecting anyone. She opened the door to find her late husband's nephew, Ethan, standing on the doorstep. Now 20, Ethan had grown into a striking young man, his boyish features replaced by a more confident, mature presence. His eyes, which once held only innocence, now carried an unreadable depth. "Hi, Aunt Felicity. I hope I'm not disturbing you," Ethan said, his voice soft yet hesitant. Felicity stepped aside, motioning for him to come in. "Of course not, Ethan. What brings you by?" "I was just in the area and thought I'd stop in," he replied, his voice trailing off as he gazed around the room, noting how serene it felt. They chatted briefly, but Felicity couldn't shake the feeling that something had changed in the way Ethan looked at her. It wasn't the innocent admiration of a young man visiting his aunt. No, this was different. His glances lingered a little too long, his gaze a little too intense. "Have you been keeping busy with your work?" Felicity asked, trying to keep the conversation light. "Yeah, I've been keeping up with school, but—" Ethan paused, looking at her with a newfound intensity. "I wanted to check in. I don't know, it's just been a while." The tension between them grew palpable, and Felicity, sensing his discomfort, quickly stood up and began making tea. The movement allowed her to clear her head, but as she turned back to face him, she noticed the way his eyes followed her every move. It wasn't just the curiosity of a nephew anymore. It was something deeper, something unspoken. As the tea steeped, they both fell into a quiet rhythm, the soft clink of cups and spoons filling the space between them. But even with the casual words exchanged, neither of them could ignore the growing pull. The evening continued in a slow, heavy silence, and Felicity couldn't shake the feeling that this visit was just the beginning of something neither of them was prepared for. This story is about to take a turn. If you're intrigued, make sure to subscribe to my channel and turn on notifications for more. Your support means the world. Don't forget to leave a like and a comment. The next few days passed in a blur for Felicity. Her yoga classes were packed, her clients were happy, and Halcyon seemed to be thriving in school. Yet, no matter how busy she kept herself, her thoughts kept drifting back to Ethan. His visit had been unexpected, and the look in his eyes that night lingered in her mind. She couldn't help but wonder what it meant, or if she had just imagined it all. She had always seen Ethan as the sweet, shy boy who had come to visit her and Gerda when they were still married. He'd been quiet, respectful, and distant, a far cry from the confident, almost smoldering young man who had knocked on her door. Felicity couldn't help but notice the way he moved, the quiet intensity he carried with him. And that gaze, the way it seemed to pierce through her, it unsettled her more than she cared to admit. The following week, as she was preparing for a new group yoga session, her phone buzzed. It was a text from Ethan. "Hey Aunt Felicity, I hope you're doing well. I know you're busy, but I was wondering if you wanted to grab a coffee sometime this week. I'd love to catch up." Felicity stared at the message for a moment. Should she respond? Could she? Part of her wanted to say no, to put an end to whatever strange energy had been building between them. But another part of her, one she didn't want to acknowledge, was curious. She hadn't had a conversation with anyone like that in a long time. The idea of someone showing genuine interest in her, really seeing her, was both comforting and frightening at the same time. After a long pause, she typed out a simple reply. "Sure, I'd like that. How about Thursday?" She hit send before she could think too much about it, and as soon as the message was sent, a wave of guilt washed over her. Was she making a mistake? She'd been single for 2 years and Ethan was family after all. But there was something in his message, a subtle warmth that made her heart flutter, even if she wasn't ready to admit it. Thursday arrived quickly, and Felicity found herself waiting nervously at the local cafe. She had dressed casually, trying to appear relaxed despite the storm of emotions brewing inside her. As she sipped on her coffee, her mind raced with questions. What would this meeting be like? Was it just a casual catch-up? Or was there more to it? Would she be able to keep things light, or would the tension between them come to the surface? The sound of the door opening snapped her out of her thoughts. She looked up to find Ethan standing in the doorway. He was wearing a simple white shirt, his hair neatly styled, and his presence was enough to draw the attention of everyone in the room. As he caught sight of her, a smile spread across his face, and for a moment, Felicity felt her heart skip a beat. "Hey, Aunt Felicity," Ethan greeted warmly as he walked over and took a seat across from her. The air between them was charged, but neither of them acknowledged it directly. "Hi, Ethan. It's good to see you again," Felicity replied, trying to keep her tone light. They sat in a comfortable silence for a moment, both of them unsure of how to start. Finally, Ethan spoke up, his voice slightly hesitant but genuine. "So how's everything going?" he asked, looking at her with those same eyes that seemed to see right through her. Felicity smiled, relieved by the simplicity of the question. "It's going well. The yoga studio is busier than ever, and Halcyon is doing great at school. How about you?" Ethan hesitated before responding, his gaze lingering on her a moment too long. "It's been good. Adjusting to things. It's been tough, but I've been keeping busy." He paused, then added almost shyly, "I've been meaning to ask you, Aunt Felicity, how do you manage it all? I mean, being a mom and running your own business. It seems like a lot." Felicity was taken aback by the question. No one had asked her that in a long time, and she realized how much she had been holding in. "I guess I just take it one day at a time," she said, her voice softening. "It hasn't been easy, but it's worth it. Halcyon is my priority, and my work keeps me grounded. I think I've found a balance, even if it doesn't always feel that way." There was a pause before Ethan spoke again, this time with a hint of vulnerability. "I've always admired you, Aunt Felicity. You're strong and independent. I never really got to tell you that." Felicity's heart skipped a beat. The sincerity in his words took her by surprise, and she found herself looking at him differently, really seeing him for the first time. Ethan wasn't just a young man with a quiet confidence. There was something deeper in him, something that drew her in and made her feel seen. Before she could respond, a server arrived with their drinks, and the moment was broken. But the weight of Ethan's words lingered in the air, filling the space between them with a new kind of tension. It wasn't just a casual coffee anymore. It felt like something more was unfolding, something neither of them were ready to confront. The days after their coffee meetup felt like a slow, overwhelming tide pulling Felicity deeper into unfamiliar waters. Every time she saw Ethan, it was harder to ignore the intensity of his gaze, the subtle way his presence made her heart race. At night, as she lay in bed, she replayed their conversation over and over again in her mind, trying to make sense of the emotions stirring within her. She had always been careful, guarded, especially after her marriage had fallen apart. But with Ethan, it felt as though her boundaries were starting to crumble. That Thursday coffee had been harmless enough, at least, that's what she told herself. They had talked about their lives, the usual small talk, but beneath the surface, something else was brewing. The way Ethan had looked at her, his words lingering longer than necessary, made Felicity's pulse quicken. It was clear he wasn't just interested in catching up. There was something more, something unspoken hanging in the air between them. But what was it? Was it possible that he was feeling the same attraction, the same magnetic pull that she couldn't seem to shake? It was on a warm, breezy Saturday afternoon when Felicity found herself once again face to face with Ethan. This time, however, it wasn't for coffee. He had come over to pick up some paperwork for a client of hers who had requested a policy update. It was a simple professional errand, nothing more, nothing less. Or at least, that's what Felicity kept telling herself. "Hi, Aunt Felicity," Ethan greeted, his voice smooth and warm as always. He stepped into her house with that same quiet confidence, but something in the way he stood, His posture, the way his eyes seemed to linger on her, felt different this time. "Hey, Ethan. The papers are on the kitchen table," Felicity replied, trying to keep her voice steady. She motioned for him to follow her, but she could feel the tension building between them with every step. It was almost palpable, like the air in the room had thickened. Ethan followed her into the kitchen, and as she turned to retrieve the documents, she felt him standing too close. His presence seemed to engulf her, filling the space with an energy that made her skin tingle. She could hear his breath, steady but heavier than usual. For a brief moment, she felt paralyzed, unsure whether to acknowledge the magnetic tension or pretend it wasn't there. "Here you go," Felicity said, handing him the papers. Her fingers brushed his, and she couldn't help but notice how warm his hand felt against hers. Ethan didn't immediately pull back. Instead, he really looked at her, and for the first time Felicity saw a hint of something raw, something that made her heart race. It was as if the world around them had faded into the background, leaving only the two of them in the room. "Aunt Felicity," Ethan began, his voice barely a whisper, but it was enough to make her stomach flutter. Felicity swallowed, suddenly unsure of what to say. She had always been the strong one, the one who kept her emotions in check. But this was different. This was territory she wasn't prepared to navigate. "What is it, Ethan?" she asked, trying to keep her voice even. "I've been thinking about that day we had coffee," Ethan admitted, his eyes never leaving hers. "I know this might sound strange, but I can't stop thinking about you, Aunt Felicity. There's something between us. I feel it, and I'm not sure what to do with it." Felicity's breath caught in her throat. She could feel her heart pounding in her chest. The words she had been avoiding for so long finally spoken aloud. The air around them seemed to crackle with the weight of what he had just said. But Felicity couldn't bring herself to answer immediately. The truth was she had felt it too, the attraction, the pull, the undeniable chemistry that had been growing ever since that first meeting. But she couldn't acknowledge it. She couldn't. I don't know what to say," Felicity whispered, stepping back slightly. She couldn't look him in the eye, not now. "You're my nephew, Ethan. This is wrong." Ethan took a step closer, his voice soft but insistent. "I don't care about the rules, Aunt Felicity. All I know is that every time I see you I can't think straight. I don't want to be just your nephew anymore. I want to be more." Felicity's breath hitched, and for a moment, she couldn't speak. The feelings she had suppressed for so long, feelings that she had convinced herself were just fleeting thoughts, now surged to the surface. Was this really happening? Was this her reality now? The silence in the room stretched on, thick and heavy, until finally Felicity found her voice. "Ethan, you're young. You have so much ahead of you. This can't happen." But Ethan wasn't listening. His gaze was unwavering, full of longing and something deeper, something she couldn't ignore any longer. "I don't want to wait anymore, Aunt Felicity," he said quietly. "I know this isn't easy, and I know it's complicated. But I can't pretend like this doesn't matter to me. It matters to me more than anything." Felicity felt her world tilt, her heart pounding faster as she stood frozen in place. The room felt smaller now, the walls closing in around her as the truth of what was happening settled like a weight in her chest. Felicity stood there, her heart hammering in her chest as she looked at Ethan. His words, so raw and full of emotion, echoed in her mind, drowning out everything else. She had always been the one in control, the one who guided others through their struggles, their self-doubt. But in this moment, facing the intensity of Ethan's gaze, she felt completely out of her depth. She opened her mouth to speak, but no words came out. What could she possibly say? Her heart wanted to scream that this was wrong, that they couldn't do this, that they couldn't cross this line. But her mind was a mess of conflicting thoughts. She had been alone for so long. She hadn't realized how much she longed for someone to truly see her, to appreciate her the way Ethan was now. I can't do this," Felicity whispered, her voice shaky. "You're my nephew, Ethan. We can't. I can't let you get hurt by this. And I can't let myself be the one to hurt you." Ethan took a step forward, his eyes never leaving hers. "You're not hurting me. You never have. I want this. I want you, Aunt Felicity. I don't care about anything else." The intensity in his voice caught Felicity off guard, and for a moment she felt her resolve waver. Ethan had always been respectful, thoughtful, but now he was standing before her as a man, someone who was willing to confront what was happening between them. But as his words settled in her chest, a cold wave of guilt and confusion hit her. This wasn't right. It couldn't be. She had a responsibility to her son, to herself, and to the memory of her late husband. This couldn't be happening. Ethan, please, Felicity said, shaking her head. This isn't love. This is something else. Something dangerous. Is it? Ethan asked, his voice steady but filled with a quiet desperation. He stepped closer, his hand brushing against hers. What if it is love, Aunt Felicity? What if we've both been denying it for too long? Felicity recoiled slightly, pulling her hand away. Her heart was in turmoil, her emotions a tangled mess of longing and fear. She took a deep breath, trying to steady herself, but her hands were shaking. You don't understand, she said softly, her voice breaking. This can't happen. We can't be together. It's not just about us. There's too much at stake. There are boundaries that shouldn't be crossed. Ethan's face softened and he reached out, his hand gently cupping her face. I understand more than you think. I don't want to hurt you, Aunt Felicity. I just want to be with you. Felicity closed her eyes, fighting the tears that threatened to spill. She had spent so long building a life that was independent, free from the mistakes of her past. But now with Ethan so close, so real, she couldn't help but feel torn. She wanted to feel the warmth of his love, but she also knew that allowing herself to go down this path would destroy everything she had worked so hard to create. She stepped back, shaking her head. No, Ethan. We can't. I'm not the person you think I am. I'm not some romantic ideal. I'm a mother. A woman who's already made mistakes. This would be too much. Ethan's expression darkened, but he didn't say anything. He just stood there, silently watching her, as if waiting for her to change her mind. And for a moment, Felicity felt as though time had frozen. The tension in the room was unbearable, and every part of her wanted to say yes, to give in to the temptation. But she couldn't. I'm sorry, she whispered, turning away from him, her heart breaking with every step. I can't do this. As she left the room, the silence that followed felt deafening. Ethan didn't follow her. He didn't try to stop her. And in that silence, Felicity realized that something had changed forever. Whatever this was between them, whatever feelings they had for each other, couldn't just be ignored. But it also couldn't be allowed to flourish. The days following that confrontation felt like an endless loop for Felicity. She kept herself busy with yoga classes, meetings, and school runs for Halcyon, trying to keep her mind off Ethan. But no matter how hard she tried to avoid him, he lingered in her thoughts. Every time she closed her eyes, she saw him. His dark eyes, the way he looked at her, like she was the only one who mattered. It was maddening. Felicity had convinced herself that walking away from Ethan was the right decision. But deep down, she knew she was fooling herself. There was something between them, something undeniable. And every time she tried to shut it out, it came rushing back with more intensity than before. It was a crisp evening when Ethan knocked on her door again. Felicity had been preparing a light dinner for herself and Halcyon, trying to stay grounded in her routine. But the sound of the knock, sharp and unexpected, sent a shiver down her spine. She opened the door, half expecting it to be one of her neighbors, but there he was, Ethan, standing in the doorway, looking as calm and composed as ever, but there was something different in the way he held himself. His jaw was set, his gaze unwavering, and his presence filled the doorway, as if daring her to turn him away again. Ethan, Felicity whispered, her voice a mixture of relief and dread. What are you doing here? I had to see you, Ethan said, his voice low but firm. I can't walk away from this, Felicity. I've been trying to, but I can't. And I can't let you hide from it either. Her heart raced as she took a step back, giving him space to enter. She hadn't expected him to be so determined, so resolute in his decision. She knew that this conversation, this moment, was unavoidable. And for the first time in a long time, she didn't feel the usual strength she prided herself on. She felt vulnerable. I told you already, Ethan. This can't happen, she said, her voice shaking. We're family. We can't just pretend that what we're feeling doesn't matter, because it does. But it doesn't change the fact that it's wrong. Ethan stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. But that's just it, Felicity. You keep saying it's wrong, but you don't know why. You don't know what we could have, what we deserve. And I'm tired of pretending that what I feel for you isn't real. Felicity's breath caught in her throat. His words were like a weight, pressing down on her chest, suffocating her. She wanted to resist, to tell him to leave, to stick to the boundaries she had tried so desperately to maintain. But a small part of her, one she couldn't ignore, wanted to give in, to let him in. You think this is easy for me? Felicity whispered, stepping away from him, her hand clutching the edge of the kitchen counter for support. I've been alone for so long and now you're telling me you feel this way? I'm not someone you can just. Her voice faltered and she took a deep breath, trying to steady herself. I'm your aunt. And I have responsibilities. I have Halcyon to think about. I can't just throw everything away. Ethan's eyes softened and for a moment he seemed to understand. I know you have responsibilities. I know you've been through so much. But I need you to understand that I'm not asking you to throw anything away. I'm asking you to take a chance on us. On what we could be. I know it's complicated and I know it's messy, but we can figure this out together. Felicity shook her head, tears threatening to fall. I don't know how to even begin, Ethan. I don't know how to let this happen. I'm not the person you think I am. I'm not that woman. I'm not some dream, some fantasy. I'm just me. Ethan took another step forward, his voice quieter now, full of longing. You don't have to be anyone else, Felicity. I don't want anyone else. I want you. I always have. There it was. The moment she had been avoiding, the moment where everything changed. Felicity felt a tremor run through her as she met Ethan's gaze, the weight of his words settling in her chest. There was no turning back from this. Whatever happened next would change everything. She closed her eyes, taking a deep, shaky breath. I can't do this to you. You deserve someone who isn't so broken. Someone who isn't so complicated. Ethan reached out, gently lifting her chin so that she had no choice but to look at him. I don't care about any of that, Felicity. I care about you. I've always cared about you. The words hung in the air between them, heavy and charged. Felicity's heart ached with a mixture of fear and desire. What was she supposed to do now? Could she really walk away from the one person who had made her feel seen, wanted, desired, after so long? She opened her mouth to speak, but before she could form the words, Ethan closed the distance between them, his lips pressing softly against hers. It was a kiss unlike any other. It wasn't rushed or fiery, but it was filled with years of longing, of unspoken emotions. Felicity's world spun, her mind clouded with the sensation of Ethan's touch, his warmth. The kiss deepened and for a moment, everything else faded away. There was no more doubt, no more fear, just the undeniable truth that they both needed each other. When they finally pulled away, Felicity's breath was ragged and her heart was racing. She looked at Ethan, her eyes wide with shock and confusion, but also with something else, something she couldn't name. I don't know what this means, she whispered, her voice trembling. But I can't stop it. I can't deny it anymore. Ethan smiled softly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. We'll figure it out together, Felicity. One step at a time. The days after the kiss were a blur for Felicity. She felt as though she were walking in a dream. Her thoughts were consumed by the touch of Ethan's lips, the way his hands had held her, the warmth that had radiated between them. But beneath the intensity of their connection, a deep sense of guilt gnawed at her, pulling her in two directions. She couldn't ignore the undeniable pull she felt toward him, but she knew that their relationship, if it could even be called that, was built on a foundation of secrecy and forbidden feelings. Ethan, on the other hand, seemed almost buoyed by their kiss. Every time he saw her, his eyes would brighten and he would take her hand, as though marking his claim on her in a world that had no place for their love. But Felicity, despite her heart's yearning, couldn't shake the fear that this would all end in destruction. One evening, after a particularly long day of teaching yoga and running errands, Felicity was sitting on her porch, watching the sunset when Ethan appeared at her door. He had come over unannounced as he often did lately. She hadn't been expecting him, but she knew that when he showed up, it was impossible to resist him. Felicity, Ethan began, his voice full of anticipation as he sat beside her. I've been thinking about us. I know things are complicated, but I don't want to hide anymore. I don't want to keep pretending this isn't real. Felicity turned her face away from him, unable to meet his gaze. The weight of his words pressed down on her like a heavy blanket, and she felt suffocated by the growing intensity between them. Ethan, we can't keep doing this, she said, her voice quieter than she had intended. We can't pretend that what we have is anything other than a dangerous mistake. I told you I have responsibilities. I have Halcyon to think about, and if anyone finds out about us, I don't care about anyone else, Ethan interrupted, his voice firm with a mixture of defiance and desperation. I care about you. And I know you care about me too. We can figure this out. We don't need anyone else's approval. Felicity closed her eyes, overwhelmed by the flood of emotions rushing through her. She had always been the responsible one, the one who kept her emotions in check, who thought carefully before acting. But with Ethan it was different. Every time he looked at her, all logic seemed to disappear, replaced with a powerful desire to be close to him, to share something that felt so genuine, even though it defied all reason. I can't keep going back and forth like this, Felicity said softly, turning her head to face him. I don't want to hurt you, Ethan. I don't want to hurt myself. But I can't promise you that this will work. I can't promise that it won't tear us apart, or destroy everything I've worked for. Ethan reached out, gently cupping her face in his hands. His touch was tender, but his eyes were filled with an intensity that made her heart ache. I don't care about the future, Felicity. I care about you. What we feel is real. You can't deny that. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. The air between them was thick with unspoken words, heavy with the weight of their decisions. Felicity knew what she had to do. She couldn't let this go on any longer, couldn't keep pretending that everything would be okay if they just kept things hidden. But part of her, the part that had been alone for so long, was terrified of letting go of the one thing that had made her feel alive again. I'm sorry, Ethan, she whispered, her voice trembling. I can't do this anymore. I can't keep living in this, in-between world. I can't keep lying to myself. Ethan's expression darkened, but he didn't say anything right away. He simply watched her as if trying to understand the pain behind her words. Then after a long silence he spoke softly, but with a finality that left no room for doubt. I understand, Felicity. But know this, I'm not going anywhere. I will always care about you. And maybe one day when the time is right, we'll find a way to be together. But for now I'm not going to force you. I want you to be sure about this. Felicity felt a wave of relief mixed with sorrow wash over her. Ethan's words were like a salve to her torn heart, but they also left her feeling more uncertain than ever. What was the right choice? Was it better to walk away now before they were both too far in? Or was there a chance for them to make it work, despite the risks? Thank you, she whispered, her voice barely audible. She didn't know what the future held, but in that moment, she realized that she had made the right decision. But as Ethan stood to leave, Felicity knew one thing for sure. This was far from over. The following days were a blur for Felicity. She went through the motions of her daily life, teaching yoga, managing her clients, and caring for Halcyon, but everything felt different. There was an emptiness inside her that she couldn't shake. No matter how much she tried to focus on her work, her mind kept drifting back to Ethan. She had made the decision to distance herself from him, to end whatever it was they had started, but the ache in her chest told her that walking away wasn't as simple as it seemed. Ethan had respected her decision, at least on the surface. He hadn't reached out, and their interactions had been minimal. But the silence between them only made Felicity feel more unsettled. Every time she caught a glimpse of him around the neighborhood or in passing, her heart would skip a beat, and she'd quickly look away, pretending she didn't feel the longing that tugged at her. It was a week later when she received the text that changed everything. We need to talk. Meet me at the park tomorrow. I can't do this without you. The message was from Ethan. He hadn't called or tried to stop by. It was clear that he had been giving her space, but his words, his insistence that he couldn't do this without her, sent a jolt through Felicity's chest. She stared at the screen for a long moment, her mind racing. Was he asking her to reconsider? Was he about to push her for answers she wasn't ready to give? But the truth was, she couldn't ignore him anymore. The pull she felt toward Ethan hadn't faded. If anything, it had only grown stronger with time. She couldn't pretend that she wasn't affected, that the feelings between them didn't matter. The next day, she found herself sitting on a bench at the park, her heart pounding as she waited for Ethan. The cool breeze rustled the leaves above her, but all she could hear was the rapid beat of her own pulse. She hadn't wanted to meet him, hadn't wanted to open the door to a conversation that could spiral out of control. But here she was, waiting for him, unable to walk away. When Ethan finally appeared, he looked more serious than she had ever seen him. His expression was calm, but there was a tension in his posture that made Felicity's stomach twist. He sat down beside her, a little too close for comfort, and for a moment, neither of them spoke. The silence between them was thick, the weight of everything unspoken hanging in the air. Finally, Ethan broke the silence. I've been thinking a lot about what you said, he began, his voice steady but filled with something deeper. About how this could tear us apart. And I get it. I understand why you're scared. But I can't keep pretending that I don't want this anymore, Felicity. I can't keep pretending that I don't want to be with you. Felicity's heart skipped, her breath catching in her throat. She knew this conversation was coming. She had known all along that Ethan wouldn't just walk away, but hearing him say it aloud made everything feel too real. The weight of their choices, the weight of their feelings, pressed down on her with a force that felt suffocating. I told you I can't do this, Felicity said, her voice barely above a whisper. We can't. It's not just about us. It's everything. The people around us, Halcyon. I can't throw all of that away. Ethan turned toward her, his face softening, but there was a deep sadness in his eyes. You don't have to throw it all away, Felicity. We can figure it out. We can make it work. I'm not asking you to abandon your responsibilities. I'm asking you to take a chance. A real chance. On us. Felicity closed her eyes, the weight of his words pressing on her like a vice. She had always been so careful, so deliberate with her decisions. She had spent years building her life, her career, and raising Halcyon. But in this moment, the life she had built seemed to pale in comparison to the pull she felt toward Ethan. It felt like the universe was testing her, pushing her to choose between safety and desire. I can't, she whispered, the words breaking her heart as they left her lips. I can't risk it all. I can't risk losing everything we've worked for. Ethan looked away, and Felicity could see the hurt in his eyes. But then after a long silence he sighed, his shoulders sagging with the weight of her rejection. I get it, he said quietly, his voice breaking. I just wanted you to know that I'll always care about you, Felicity. No matter what happens, I'll never stop caring. But I can't make you love me. I can't make you want this. His words hit her like a physical blow. She had never seen him so vulnerable, so broken. For a moment, Felicity felt a pang of guilt twist inside her. She knew that she was making the right choice, but the pain in Ethan's eyes made her question everything. I'm sorry, Felicity whispered, her throat tightening with emotion. I never meant to hurt you. Ethan nodded, his jaw clenched. He stood up, slowly, as if the weight of her decision had physically drained him. I know. I just hope one day you'll understand. And with that he turned and walked away, leaving Felicity sitting alone on the bench, her heart heavy with the knowledge that she had just made the hardest choice of her life. Days passed after that painful conversation at the park. Felicity tried to bury herself in her routine, filling her time with clients, yoga classes, and school runs for Halcyon. But each moment without Ethan felt like a piece of her had been torn away. She could still feel the ache of his touch, the echo of his voice telling her how much he wanted to be with her. His words lingered in her thoughts like a haunting melody that she couldn't escape. But despite the ache, Felicity knew that she had made the right choice. At least that's what she told herself. The consequences of their relationship, of their feelings, were too great to ignore. There were lives involved, responsibilities, and expectations. She couldn't risk it all for something that could never work. She had chosen stability, the life she had built, and the people who depended on her. Halcyon had noticed the change in his mother. He wasn't sure what had happened, but he could sense her sadness, the distance that had settled between them. He'd asked her a few times if she was okay, but Felicity had brushed it off, not wanting to burden him with her emotional turmoil. But deep down she knew that Halcyon could sense the unspoken tension. One evening, as she sat in the living room, going over the financials for her business, Halcyon came to sit next to her, his small hand resting on her shoulder. Mom, he said quietly, looking up at her with concern, you haven't been the same. What's wrong? Felicity turned to face her son, her heart tightening. I'm just tired, Halcyon. A lot has been going on, but it's nothing to worry about. Halcyon studied her for a moment, his young face full of empathy and wisdom that belied his age. I know when something's bothering you, Mom. You don't have to hide it from me. I'm here for you. The words cut through Felicity like a knife. She knew her son loved her, cared about her in a way that no one else did. But she also knew that she couldn't burden him with her pain. Not when he was still so young. Not when his world should be filled with the joy and innocence of childhood, not the complicated mess of adult emotions. I know, sweetheart, she whispered, pulling him into a gentle hug. I just need some time. I'll be okay. I promise. But as she held him, she knew that the road to healing would be long. She couldn't just forget Ethan. The feelings they shared were still there, lingering beneath the surface. But she had made her choice, and now it was time to move on. Several weeks later, as Felicity sat in her studio preparing for an evening yoga class, she received another message from Ethan. She hesitated before opening it, the familiar feeling of guilt creeping into her chest. But this time the message was different. It wasn't filled with longing or desperation. It was simple, honest. I'm doing okay, Felicity. I'm moving forward. I hope you're doing the same. I'll always remember you and I'll always care. Take care of yourself. Felicity stared at the message, the weight of his words sinking in. She had known that Ethan would eventually move on, but the finality of his message hit her harder than she expected. She felt a deep sadness but also a sense of peace. They both had to move forward. She had to let go of the past and the possibility of what could have been. With a deep breath, she put the phone down and walked into the yoga studio, ready to teach her class. She focused on the present, on the people in front of her, and the work that still needed to be done. The emotional turmoil was still there, lurking beneath the surface, but for the first time in a long while, Felicity felt the faintest glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she could find peace in her life again. As she guided her students through their poses, she reminded herself that life was full of difficult decisions, and sometimes, the hardest part was letting go of the things we couldn't change. But Felicity was strong. She had survived loss, loneliness, and heartbreak. She would survive this too. If you've made it to the end, thank you so much for being part of this emotional journey with Felicity and Ethan. Their story is one of love, loss, and difficult choices, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. Do you think Felicity made the right decision? What would you have done in her shoes? Let me know in the comments below. I can't wait to read your thoughts. And if you haven't already, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you never miss out on any of our new videos. Your support means the world to me, and it helps me continue sharing stories just like this one with all of you. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.